Excited to welcome Victor Arias to the stage. He'll be moderating. Again, he's a senior client partner of Korn, Ferry, and board of director of Popeyes, which must be so fun. That's super cool. And so you'll again hear from Lisa, if you can mind joining us on stage. Lisa Garcia Quiroz, Elizabeth Nieto, Hernan Saenz, Anilu Vazquez-Ubarri, and Cesar Villalpando.
So thank you all so much. Welcome to everybody. I know people flew from great distances to be here as well. I came from Dallas, and I'm just happy to be here in the Big Apple. So thanks to Eliana for your leadership. It's great to see all these young faces. The only downside to that is it makes me feel a lot older. And Ricardo, thanks for your words and your vision for this as well. Special thanks to Hispanic Executive Magazine, Pedro Guerrero, and your team, phenomenal. And I know it takes a lot of work for this. Kathy Kantorsky, Vianney Busquets, and Krista Horbenko. I mean, I've gotten to know them. Please, a round of applause for them that put this thing together. But before we start, I need to tell you a little bit about a study that was made by Harvard and Stanford about these kind of gatherings. They take place after lunch, and there's three kinds of attendees, equal thirds. The first third, those that are very fully engaged, they are really paying attention, they love the content, and they're happy. The second group, they start off very engaged, but you really lose them. They just fall asleep, they really don't like what you're saying. The third group starts off very engaged, but they end up lapsing into these daydreams, and they're usually, romantic in nature, and they enjoy the session as well. So all we know is that at least 2/3 of you are going to enjoy the session today. So thank you for coming.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
So just some backdrop. You know, the session is Latinos in Corporate America, the Keys to Success. And, you know, we've kicked this around many times. It's been talked about forever. But I think the timing is perfect because I think there's relevancy, there's numbers about what the business case is for Latinos to this country. So we have a panel of distinguished guests here and all of you that can really opine on this. But we want to explore, and we've used the word already, continuum. The continuum of Latinos that start at school and universities, through the path through corporate America, and then service on the boardroom. And that's a continuum we want to really talk about. Again, that's what we're here for. Latinos represent the most significant opportunity for growth and prosperity for this country. That's the business case. Two facts. The majority of college entrants that matriculate into college are Latino. First time. That's a fact we don't even think about. We hear about high school dropouts, but for the first time, Latinos are the majority of matriculation candidates for college. The second fact, there are 1 million Latinos that turn 18 every year for the next 10 years. That's a fact. That will have an incredible change on our country, and people have to pay attention. Corporations have to pay attention. So that's the backdrop of which we want to talk about. Despite all that, we look at corporate America. Of the Fortune 500 board seats, less than 2% have representation for Latinos. There's less than 3% CEOs in corporate America. Lucky to have Robert here. But that's just not acceptable. There's a huge gap there. So what do we do about that gap? So I'm going to ask our panelists to start off just so that you know who they are. I mean, their pictures are in there, but your name and the company that you're with.
Sure. Lisa Garcia Quiroz, Time Warner Inc.
Hernan Saenz, Bain and Company.
Elizabeth Nieto, MetLife.
Cesar Villalpando, Kaiser Permanente.
Anilu Vazquez-Ubarri, Goldman Sachs.
Perfect. A round of applause for them, please. So the first question we're going to talk about is, what are the most important attributes that corporate boards look for? We have a lot of actually board members that are here amongst us and that have been profiled on the screens. And so, get to know who they are, please, because they will give you insights. How can executives build these skill sets also, what corporations are looking for? Hernan, I'm going to go to you because you deal with your corporate clients every day. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
Yes. If you just look at the numbers, right, the vast majority of board members are actually executives in other companies that either have or have had a P&L role, right? Now there's a little bit of more diversity recently, right? Some very senior finance folks are being brought in for audit committees, some very senior HR folks for compensation committees. But if you want to be a board member, you want to be a senior executive. So it's not surprising that we only have 2% board members when we only have 3% senior executives. That's the pipeline, right? So the question that we should be asking ourselves is what's happening? Why are we not getting to the senior role, right? And the numbers are actually, on the one hand, disappointing, and on the other hand, it's a huge opportunity, right? We represent about 17% of the US labor force. We represent 7% of middle management. And we only represent 3% of senior executives. Right? Our promotion rate is half the rate or less of the white population. And that should be unacceptable to everyone in this room. Right? So what could we do about it? And it goes back to what Ricardo was saying, right? Number one, we have to make that pool available, right? And that is an individual thing first and foremost, right? There's a lot of people in middle management that want it, and if you don't want it more than they do, we're not going to get there. You have to invest in yourself with education, with sponsors, and you got to want it so that that pool is available so that those corporations selecting the executive can't say no.
Great.
But the other thing is actually what Ricardo said, which is what the corporations are doing has to change a little bit, right? We have done great in recruiting Latinos and in having Latino populations. We haven't done great in promoting them to the most senior place, right? And so that has to change. It has to be less about the entry point, and it's got to be more about the promotion point and what do we do.
Thank you for your point of view. Lisa, you also probably have a point of view because we've talked a little bit about this.
Sure. I think I concur with you, Hernan, that having a strong financial background and P&L experience is really important. And obviously, having an MBA, you know, and having that type of actual preparation is important. But I would also argue that in a world in which we're going increasingly digital, that having somebody that's had some experience, whether in a mainstream corporation or in a startup that has dealt with the digital world, is actually something that's increasingly important. So, and I think that regardless of the industry, that's something that we're all looking at. You know, the only thing I would add to what you were saying, because I think those are really important points about how the pipeline really thins out at the top. One of the things that I would tell you in my experience is that to get to the top, I think a couple of things are important. One is, what field are you going into when you go to that corporation at first? I think disproportionately Latinos have been in what are considered staff positions as opposed to line positions. So to get to the C-suite, to be a finance executive, a marketing executive, whatever it is, whatever skill set or experience that's important to reach the top is something that we're underrepresented in. And I think oftentimes it's not that we don't have the skill set, I think we don't have the mentorship and advice that's given to us early on in our careers. So I think that's one piece of it. And then the second piece of it, which I know Victor wants to talk about, which is sponsorship, because I also believe strongly that you can reach the middle of an organization just clearly based on intellect and skill. But to reach beyond that level suddenly becomes how much people like you, who you know, and who is opening doors for you. And I think that could be, and I know all of our panelists have an opinion about that.
Any other thoughts from anybody on that issue about what boards are looking for?
The only thing that I would add to what's already been said is it does seem as though there's also movement amongst the boards to get the right technical fit for the board, but also find somebody who has contributed to the community at large so that you get kind of double bang for your buck. And I see more and more of that. And then the other thing I would say is every organization has a weakness, a threat, an opportunity. And I think positioning yourself to demonstrate whether it's technology or whether it's something else, but every company has those. Yeah. And if you can position yourself to be somebody who helps them address that gap, I think that's also another benefit.
Sure. And I think I'll just close this question out with just another thought about what boards are looking for, and we were talking about it in the back. They're looking for folks that have prior board experience. It may not be a company experience, but the platform of serving on your school's board of trustees, board of regents, board of visitors, that's an incredible platform to get into the boardroom. And quite frankly, that was my path to the board that I'm on. Or large not-for-profits, but take a leadership role in those not-for-profits. So I think that's really important. There's another group that's been formed as well. Pat Pineda's here and Dolores Kunda. They are on the board, and they formed a group, and I'm actually on the board too, called the Latino Corporate Directors Association, brand new organization. But we're there to increase the number of Latinos on corporate boards. A lot of work being done. We've had a lot of conversations with Pedro Guerrero and how we all kind of come together. So I just wanted to leave you with that note. You talked about, and you mentioned the issue of sponsorship. So, in order to get to the C-suite, technical expertise only gets you there, like you said, but after that, it's the relational aspects of the skill sets that you bring. So, what does sponsorship mean? What does it mean to you, Lisa, since you brought it up? And then I'm going to ask Elizabeth about that as well.
This is a topic I love to talk about, and because to me, there's a very distinct difference between mentorship, which I think you hear a lot of people talk about, versus sponsorship, right? A mentor is someone that can give you advice, that helps guide you, that maybe tells you, well, should I take this job or should I take that job? Or helps you decide on different areas of opportunity. A sponsor, though, is someone who opens a door. A sponsor is someone who has the ability to actually move the chess piece of your career into a different opportunity, into a better opportunity. And, I would tell you that a large part of my own mentorship of Latinos in corporate America or at my own company is oftentimes around the importance of developing relationships within the organization. Because I find that we're really good at putting our head down and working really hard to get that A at work. That's what made us successful at Harvard, at Yale, at Dartmouth. That's what allowed us to go on to prestigious graduate schools. But in corporate America, that will only get you so far. And it's building the relationships and actually being very strategic about it and taking the time to meet people and engage with them in a different way that I think is important to your career.
Elizabeth, you have some thoughts about this.
Exactly that. The other thing is that, as you said before, do you look for someone like you to be your sponsor, or do you look for someone with influence? And because there's so few Latinos in areas of influence, you need to be open to get to build those relationships with people that are not like you. And therefore, that sponsorship will work for you. But it's in our protege status that we need to go and build, and we need to look for opportunities and see who are the people that care about just development of others that will be good sponsors. And what Ricardo was saying, you can't create programs, you can't create skill set for both the sponsors and the proteges so they get to understand the value of the sponsorship. Because at the end of the day, each of us have had someone. What is always very interesting when you go and ask people, who was your sponsor? Many times they don't know. And that's the other important work that we're doing to get people to be aware, because when you create a relationship with a sponsor, you now need to give back. Yeah. And you need to give back to that person, but you also need to bring others with you and create that pocket of credibility with the people that you also develop.
Anilu, I know you've worked on this as well. So
Yeah, I agree with everything that Elizabeth and Lisa said. I think there's another aspect of sponsorship that we don't think about that often. And again, it relates to what Ricardo was saying, is that when you're being sponsored as a Hispanic person, you're also sharing some knowledge, particularly if the person is not Hispanic. And I think that that's equally important because it's a multiplier effect. And we want these efforts to be scalable also. So we have other people that are advocating not just for you as an individual, but actually for this pool of talent. And at the end of the day, it's a commercial enterprise to have people that are going to be able to move around the organization. So for sponsors, if they have someone who is being successful, there's a lot of value for them too, because those are people that are also going to go to bat. So I agree, Elizabeth, though, that people need to be creative in terms of who they will develop that relationship with. And I do find also that people sometimes want to just have someone who they like necessarily as a sponsor, and sometimes you just need to have someone who's actually going to give you very direct feedback, and might not be someone who you might choose to go out socially, but in that moment in time actually can serve to develop you. And then the mentor maybe you can have a little bit more fun with.
So tell me a little bit about employee resource groups, because I know you had brought that up, and the role that they play within companies. And Elizabeth, you might have some
Yeah,
comments on that.
we have, at Goldman we have over 100 employee resource groups, and they're all at different stages. What I think that all of them have, first of all, they have a huge influence in terms of the satisfaction of our employees, and it's not just the diverse employees, but everyone at the firm. They also serve many purposes, from mentorship, sponsorship. We have our summer interns at the firm right now, and the networks actually play a lot of the role that we're talking about for that incoming class. But equally, at the more senior levels, we have a group of senior partners that know each other from the network, but that also get together to advocate for promotions and to make sure that mobility across the firm is happening. So I think that if you leverage the networks, commercially, obviously they can be leveraged for that as well, but I think also for the relationship that happens in every organization. And so I think that they're key.
Yeah. Any other comments on sponsorship? Yeah.
Just if I can comment on the BRGs, we have a very large Latino association. I've had the privilege of being an executive sponsor for them for several years. They're always in the top 5 whenever they get, they go through these competitions with the National Chamber of Commerce. And one of the things that we've done the last couple of years that has been really helpful is, there's got to be a very good business alignment between your ERGs, your BRGs, and the company's objectives. It used to be that the BRGs would go fishing for an initiative or an activity, and leadership didn't know what to do with that. Well, what do you know about this, or what do you know about that? Yes, you guys are all happy Latinos, but what am I going to do with you? I've got people that are trained here in sales, and so what we did the last couple of years is we flipped it backwards, and because of my position, I was able to schedule a day where we had key executives from each of the different, pillars of the organization: marketing and sales, HR, et cetera, finance. And we had them come in and present their strategic plan to the BRG. So the BRG was actually in the audience, and we had leadership present to them, here's the primary objectives for the next year for the organization. And then the work group in the afternoon was around, how does the BRG help advance and partner with you to advance your objectives? And from that, we had a handful of initiatives, but they were probably the most aligned with the organization. And not all of them, hit a home run, but several of them did. And what it did is it shifted sort of those executives who didn't really know how to take advantage of these BRGs and said, okay, I get it now. I can see how these communities are strong and they can help us advance the business. I would encourage all of you to do that.
Yeah.
Can I just add one more thing, because I think when we were preparing for this, there's such a wide range, right? Because when you start off in your career, I think the BRGs are really important. And I think, Cesar, you talked about the fact that you, in fact, were a sponsor of it. So I just want to make sure that sort of it's clear that, when we prepped, we made the distinction that for sort of entry-level Latinos in a corporation, the BRGs are really important. I think when you're at a senior level and about to sort of launch into the higher level, that in fact it's the things like sponsorship and maybe more of the invisible hand, if you will, that's going to take more of an active role. I just wanted to throw out a question to both of you, because Elizabeth, you brought something up about when someone chooses who might be a sponsor. And I think that oftentimes I get the question, do you choose one or does one come to you, right? And I guess I've been lucky in my own personal experience. I've taken sort of at times big, bold jumps in my career and have been noticed, right? I started a kids magazine called Time for Kids, and that's how the publisher of Time magazine got to know me and became a terrific sponsor and a good friend till this day. So my question is, maybe it's worth going back and just sort of talking a little bit about how you stick with a sponsor, or how do you find one?
But I think that you have to be strategic. So there's a lot of senior leaders in our organizations that are interested in developing this, and it could start as a mentoring relationship. That if you know that that person could be important to where you want to go next, that's the relationship that you can build. And you can start, it's easier to ask someone, can you be my mentor? Because people usually want to do that. And hopefully that develops later into a sponsorship. But I think that you have to be strategic. Or you can be lucky and you can, be noticed by others. But then as soon as you figure out that that person is your sponsor, that the person is willing to put their equity for your career, you also need to build that so they know what your aspirations are. They know what you have done, your accomplishments, so they can really use that to your benefit.
But I think it's really important. One of the things you said, Lisa, was that these are the people that, pound the table for you. People can only know that if they have some actual knowledge about your performance and what you excel at, and there might be, again, moves that need to be made. And so I think it's we have tried different approaches. There are some designations that are, we assign sponsors. We tend to be very delicate with that because, there has to be a natural match that happens. But there are some instances where people may have not connected, but they have the desire. You just need to make sure that certain things are right. Yeah. Like they are going to be in meetings with them. They have the ability to potentially be more senior than their own manager so that they can influence those conversations, but I agree that you have to be careful about how you form the relationship. But you also, for us, we need to be out there also and take risk so that people notice what you're doing.
That's a good segue into the next question, because we have to flip it now and say, sponsorship is best when it's broad, but let's flip it back onto us. What responsibilities do we have as Latino executives or board members? And how do we promote that? So what responsibilities do we have? And none, I would love to hear what your
I have a strong opinion on this. The first thing you do is you take the Latino thing aside.
First of all, you don't have any strong opinions.
Right. I don't ever want to be the Latino guy on the board, and I don't want to be the Latino executive, right? I want to be the best executive. I want to be the best board member, right? And if you put that aside and you earn your stripes, then you have the credibility to make the moves, right? Then you have the credibility to say, I will sponsor the diversity program because I'm one of the best executives here, not because it's my ethnicity, right? And I think that that's the way to do it. Now, the other thing, right, is this sponsorship concept, which is reasonably new, is wonderful, right? It basically recognized that in middle management in America, you get stuck. And the number of opportunities, right, do not get doled out democratically, right? You have to have people who help you, right? And so we have to be sponsors. We have to pick the people that are going to be those that we're going to give opportunities to, right? I think the last one is we just have to be more visible, right? We have to do more of this, but it can't just be in Tribeca in New York, right? We got to go to the Latino communities, and they have to see us. They have to believe, right, that this is doable by everyone, right? That we have to get the education and that you can actually aspire to be. So,
Cesar.
So I have a couple of different views on this. One of them has to do with we all come from organizations who have a growing recognition of the Latino consumer market. And one of the things that I think all executives should do is make sure that your organization is recognizing that and that they're putting resources behind that. And so to be concrete, I know nothing about marketing and sales. I have P&L responsibility for about 10 billion in my company. Our company is 60 billion. And I'm line operations. I'm about as operations as you can be, okay? So I know nothing about marketing and sales, but I know a lot about what's happening with the explosion of the Latino consumer and that market. One of the things that I do is I intrude. I walk across the hall. I intrude with our marketing people, and I have them demonstrate to me what are they doing to understand that market, and then I have them demonstrate to me what kind of resources are they putting behind that market, that opportunity. So like positions like Eliana, you know, we just added one a few years ago. That's a shame on us. But that's part of what I think is my responsibility is I step out of my role and I make sure that the company understands that there's a market there that we should be grabbing and that we should be going aggressively for. And I get nasty if they don't. And I can get away with that because, you know, I'm an executive at that point and I've got some tenure there. But I do get nasty. And I think we all need to get nasty that way and make sure that our organization, because if you build that, then that's the gift that keeps on giving, right? If you've got a consumer base that's growing, that's Latino, now you don't have to argue for the business imperative. It's right there staring you in the face. The other thing that I think is important for us as Latinos is we've been talking about the sponsorship and advocacy, and I'm right where Ricardo went, which is he set up some personal objectives for folks. I'm a big believer in that. You know, the sponsorship needs to move beyond a feel-good thing. You know, it's not a charity project anymore, folks. It's not you finding the next Latino and holding them and hugging them, and you know, it's about placing them in those positions. And the only way you're going to get to that is to put a little bit of bite behind that. And the way that Ricardo is doing it, I'm a firm believer of that, is I go to my team and I say, you know, your performance, that part of your performance evaluation is going to suffer if you're not showing me that you are actively advancing these folks. And if you're not, guess what? You get a low grade on that. It really changes the conversation with these folks, and it's no more this lovey-dovey sponsorship, take you out to coffee, let's go watch, you know, the McFarlane cross-country movie together. It's not that. It's putting some real concrete stakes. And then the last thing I'll say, you see I got a lot of passion on this, and I haven't done any research on this, and maybe there's some research out there that I'll probably get bombed an email because of this, but I do think that there is this interesting dynamic between the humility trait of Latinos and how that interferes with self-advocacy as you hit the middle management thing. I see a lot of heads nodding. I have very many Latino colleagues who are struggling, and then when I watch them in the boardroom or in the executive suites, they have this trait about, it's dirty to market myself. You know, it comes from that humility trait. I don't want to be outspoken because that's dirty. Why do I need to talk just for the sake of talking? And I say to them, no, it's not about that. It's about problem solving, and it's about letting the organization know that you can do more, that you have more gas in your tank, and I call it hang your shingle. Hang your shingle. Latinos do not do a good job of hanging their shingle. We just think that our work should speak for itself. We have that work ethic thing, put your head down, work hard, good things will come to you. And that's true up to a point, and it certainly was true for me, but then at some point you have to hang your shingle. And it's not dirty to hang your shingle. You're not selling yourself to the devil. You're just letting people aware that you can contribute in different ways. And I think other cultures in corporate America, particularly the white culture, is much better able of doing that. And I think Latinos struggle with confusing, but am I abandoning my humility trait by doing that? And I say, no, you're not. Yeah. No, you're not. And I don't know, I have no idea if there's any research. This is Cesar Villalpando's observations only, so don't get mad at me.
Those are really good points, and thank you for bringing those up. I tend to resonate a lot also with what you said, Hernan. The balancing act for Latino directors and for Latino CEOs. I mean, you have to be viewed as a top-notch executive before you can advocate for any of the issues that may be important to you personally. So I see my role as a director at Popeyes not to necessarily talk about diversity or to talk about Latinos, It's about to talk to my colleagues so that they can speak up about the value of Latinos on the business case or whatever, but to make them aware. I feel very uncomfortable initially talking about it. I feel comfortable now after 14 years on the board. I can talk about it, no problem. And I can just see, Robert as a Latino CEO, the balancing act of, of how you move the agenda along. I heard the CEO of ADP at the ASET conference that we had in Atlanta talk about his, people maybe viewed him promoting a Latino, but he said, he's the best guy. He's the best person or she's the best person. It's not a question about being Latino and being a favorite. So it's a real balancing act.
Can I just throw a little
yes.
bit of a devil's advocate thing and then I'll shut up? The one thing to watch for, and I agree 100% with what you're saying, you got to be the best. But I do also believe that sometimes for Latinos, they think that their bar has to be higher. Mm-hmm. And so they will wait to hang their shingle until they're getting A++s.
Well,
when their colleagues,
the bar does have to be higher. It does.
But that's my only point is that. So what I'm trying to say is, I think it's a little bit of both. I think if you don't have the mustard to bring forward, forget it, all bets are off. But I think Latinos wait too long to hang their shingle. They wait to hit. I've seen this. I know you might disagree, and this is why this is a good conversation. I think an important trait for us to learn is to begin to hang our shingles sooner. We wait until we hit the A+ when our colleagues are hitting a B, and they're already promoting themselves.
Look,
they're advocating for themselves.
I would argue that for people of color and for women, you're promoted after you've proven that you can do something versus a white man who's promoted on the basis of potential. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is a fact.
Right.
I mean, and this is what happens all over, mm-hmm. not just corporate America, but I think whenever you see mm-hmm. people move into positions of power. When I hear Hernan and Victor talk a little, I've been in corporate America, it'll be 25 years next week since I graduated from Harvard Business School. And I graduated from Harvard College and Harvard Business School and went into probably the whitest institution I've ever been to. If anyone could believe that a company could actually be whiter than Harvard College and Harvard Business School, it's really kind of amazing when you think about this. But I quickly came to the realization that I'm 5'1", I'm chubby, I'm brown, and I have a last name no one can pronounce. And I had to be that good. I had to start mm-hmm. magazines to be a publisher.
Absolutely.
So I don't know, I struggle with this issue of, I guess I've always felt like I've always had to be better mm-hmm. to be noticed. And I think that is something that we all face. And I feel mm-hmm. passionately that the value of this organization and the value of what Pedro and Ricardo have done is to bring us all together again and to remind us that it's our responsibility to open the doors now. Mm-hmm. Just like we all supported one another in college.
Yeah. Wonderful. I'm total agreement with you, and I won't argue with you anymore, Lisa. So. I've known her for a long time. I love her to death. The moniker Alumni Society really, it says many things to many people, whether they're insiders or outsiders. But for us, it's a privilege of having attended schools, universities that have really made a difference in our lives. And so I'm going to ask each of y'all for a little closing statement on the final question. Are the universities and colleges, are they doing enough for Latinos? So I'm going to start with you, Anilu, mm-hmm. and then we'll go around and have it as a closing statement.
I mean, I think it really depends on the school, but I also think that the question that we really need to ask is, are we pushing enough for them to do what they need to do, and are we present enough? Because that wraps up what we have talked about, is putting in their heads that they can do more and that they can take risks so that they can hang their shingle earlier. But also having that motivation to see people like us, people like all of you, and start to ask questions. I had no idea when I was at Princeton that I could work at Goldman Sachs. No idea. And it's a great job. It has been a great experience for me. I want to change that. If it's for 3, 4 people that I can tell my story, and I encourage them to think about any of our companies, that's key.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether they're doing enough. I'll tell you my experiences in working with our interns or new grads is that they're coming in very well prepared technically, but they also come in scared. A lot of pressure to succeed, at school, and then a lot of pressure to succeed in your job. And the one thing that I do see that they seem to be hungry for is examples of you can do it. So the thing that resonates the most with some of these young Latinos that I've had the privilege over the years of meeting is, they want to know sort of your story. And they love hearing your story because it tells them que sí se puede. You can grow up in Oxnard, you can grow up in downtown LA, and you can succeed. And so maybe my only thought is, can the universities help more in that space? Because by the time that they come to us, these are frightened young people, and then they start to hear these stories about each of us, and that it gives them confidence and hope. So that would be my only observation: is can they do more, or do they have to wait to get those examples until they are already kind of thrown out into the wild?
Okay.
Yeah, I think building on what Cesar was saying, I think it's not one institution that can solve for the problem by itself. So it is the education piece, but it's also the work that we're doing from a corporation perspective and bringing those role models. So universities that are interested in showing that, we should be spending the time and the money to do that, because that's the only way that we will show, that you can take risks, that there's opportunities. And the companies that are doing that are going to be the ones that are going to get the best talent.
Yeah.
I'll answer and use a dichotomy similar to what the one Ricardo used, is that we've made a lot of progress, right? There is not a single annual report of a university that doesn't actually take pride in their minority population, both for the faculty and the students. And decades ago, that wasn't the case, right? So there's an awareness, right? I think schools are not doing two things, right? They're not solving the affordability issue. A lot of Latinos who enroll every year in college drop out because they need to work, and that is unacceptable, right? It's not about whether you get the kids in, it's about whether they actually graduate, right? That's number one. And the second one is they're not doing enough with placement, right? Including the confidence issue. And for a Latino to actually make the decision of giving up the immediate income to actually feed themselves and help feed their family and go for 4 years and not actually have a placement that helps, that's tough, right? And so I think it's, they're good at the entry point. I think they got to get better on the back end.
Okay. Lisa?
Well, there are more Latinos graduating from college than ever before. You mentioned that, Victor. And from the competitive colleges, the number of Latinos graduating from the Ivy League, it's staggering. Back when Ricardo and I were, going to, the East Coast Chicano student organizations, it's almost unbelievable. But I would say that we haven't done enough to help keep those organizations, those schools accountable. I went to my 25th college reunion 5 years ago. There were 5 Latinos there, 5. Now, will Harvard care about, further servicing their Latino alumni if you're not even there, if you're not present, if you're not writing checks? So I think it's really important for us to also make sure that we're helping students that are there on campus now, or alumni that are looking for placement, and helping those institutions become even better.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll close with my own comments before we open it up for questions, but I think that there's a couple of things as well. Number one, I think even with this group, there's a danger of becoming elitist, because we did go to great universities, but the fact is that the majority of Latinos that are educated are going to state schools. So we have to change the conversation. Me too. We have to change the conversation with corporate America that the fact that Latinos have a longer graduation rate is because they're working, they take on no debt, and they come out fully trained and very hungry. So I think that we have to change the conversation about standards, and that'll help the whole hiring issue as well. The second thing is that even with the elite institutions, they can get very comfortable with hiring the generation, my kids, our kids. But where you make the difference is to hire the first-time college graduate. That's where you make the difference. It's harder work, but we have to push our institutions to create that legacy and keep changing lives there. So that's my closing comments. A round of applause for our panelists, please.
We're gonna go.
We're going to open it up for questions, and so please, we'll do for like 15 minutes. Yes, sir. State your name and then your question.
There's a microphone coming there. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this very inspiring discussion. My name is Carlos Barresueta. I'm Dean of Social Science and Business at Union College, a public university, and I'm in academic management. I had a question about demographic change. You know, we know what the numbers are in 20 years, and it's moving incredibly fast. I'm in my early 30s, and people from my generation were very concerned about how the numbers move, and the hiring is not moving with the numbers, and we're concerned about moving the needle. You know, I went to Colombia and Yale, but as you know, the majority of Latinos are studying in public universities. That's point number one. But, you know, we are at the top end of merit, right? If you go to Colombia and Yale and are admitted in the New York bar, you're at the very top end. And with this kind of demographic numbers that we have, if we focus on the extraordinary merit paradigm for hiring, we are facing a South African paradigm, I feel. You know, I really feel that. So what can companies do to, you know, have something that will actually help the country 15, 20 years from now to move the needle where it should be with those incredible demographic numbers?
Carlos, what's your question?
That's the question. What could companies do in order to move the needle in terms of hiring? Because if we're focusing at the top end, you know, we are not going to get there. I mean, we're going to get 6 or 7 Latinos more, or 10 or 12, but we're moving to a majority-minority paradigm. So, you know, if we focus on the top end of the merit, are we going to get there in 20 years?
Yeah.
For country building.
Okay. Anybody want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, you're absolutely right. And
Thank you,
actually
Carlos.
for us, you know, and I'm sure you've seen this, the Hispanic and Latino population at our company has had the biggest growth, actually. But what we're doing is, because, you know, this is a numbers game and it takes time to develop people through the pipeline, we're actually going to the high school level. And so that's something that we had done in the past, but we had kind of, you know, been in and out. And we've decided that our strategy is going to be long-term, and we're going to start to, you know, go to where people are and tell them about us and teach them about, you know, the many opportunities that they have. And if they don't come to us, maybe they'll go to one of the other great companies. But we're very targeted and focused on that. And by the way, we're hoping also that we're going to learn a lot in terms of how they're thinking of us as a company, and then apply that to the people that are already with us.
Thank you. Hernan, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, look, you all know the number, right? In 2050, we will be 30% of the US population with the highest labor force participation rate. 1 of 3 of us will be Latinos, right? Either the United States actually creates highly educated labor force and stays competitive in the world arena, or we become a country of laborers. That is the why we are facing, right? Now, it's multidimensional, right? It starts at the community level, probably even before high school, right? And the aspiration that I will not be a blue-collar laborer, but that I can actually go in a white-collar profession, right? And the schools have to make it affordable, because if not, I will not go to school. I will have to work to feed my family. And then the corporations need to change their decision algorithms to bring more of those people in. So it is, you know, what you're raising is probably the biggest concern that the macroeconomists have about the United States, right? But it is a multi, you know, dimensional problem that has to be addressed from multiple places.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for this panel. It's really awesome. My name is Luis Ochoa from Stanford University. This question is for Cesar. What are some examples of hanging your shingle, as you were explaining earlier?
What are some examples of hanging your shingle? So what I mean by that when I talk about that is is to let your organization know that you are interested and capable of doing more and growing. And sometimes it's as simple as that. And to me, what I see too many times almost is that whether it's at the entry level or at the middle management level in particular, work ethic and hard work can get you so far. And then because I'm fascinated whenever I see employee opinion surveys, and I see, even though you look at the position data that speaks to the hierarchy we've been talking about, which is a lot of Latinos at the first tier, shrinking at the second tier, and almost non-existent at the third tier. So you have that dynamic, and you would think that that would be a very disenchanted workforce. You look at employee opinion surveys, and we're the happiest go-lucky people ever, right? I mean, it's like the satisfaction level is through the roof. I mean, in my organization, Latinos are some of the happiest people, but we represent that same dynamic. And it's because I think what happens is we get so focused on, my culture reinforces hard work and humility. So what I try to teach people to do is when you get at certain levels, whether it's at the entry level, all the way up to middle management usually, is I try to teach them is how do you tell people that you are interested and capable of doing more, that you can take on more challenge. I use the term gas in your tank. I say, let people know that you have gas in your tank. It doesn't mean that you are out there, again, overselling yourself, but just, sometimes knowing, because we look so happy that we give off this sense that, hey, we could do this job for the next 20 years. And then all of a sudden you let somebody know that, hey, I want to do more. They go, oh my God, I thought you loved what you were doing. You're sitting in the department that's the happiest department in the whole company. And so there's a misperception that we're happy-go-lucky because we don't complain. And so that's what I talk about when I say hang your shingle.
And build on the stereotype of how ambitious we are, because it's really around that. So if people think that we're not an ambitious culture, then they will not think that we have aspirations to do more. So you need to figure it out what are, in the culture of your organization, what are some of the prejudices that they have around our culture, because that's the way they will look at each of us from those lenses. And they would assume that you're happy and, you're not ambitious, you don't have aspirations.
And Latinos, many of us struggle with saying the words, I want a promotion. That feels like, oh my God, you're overselling yourself. Who are you? Órale pues, qué presumido, ¿verdad? Right? That's what we tell ourselves. I mean, what do we tell? What's the language we use with each other when somebody tries to self-promote themselves? Presumido, right? And so that gets into our culture, into our head. And so what I try to teach some of my Latino colleagues is, you're not a presumido. You're just telling people you want to do more, you can do more. It's very different than saying, I want a promotion.
Thank you very much. First, Ricardo, and then Alfred, and then Manny.
I just wanted to make an observation, a response to the first question. When we think about the various issues that we confront, they happen at different levels. And so, we put together this event to kind of focus on the issue of retention and advancement of professionals into the higher levels of corporate organizations. That's something that you can address at the level of the corporate organization, and you can bite that off in a certain context. The thing that we have to guard against is the temptation to go back to when we were undergrads and feel like we're going to boil the ocean, right? We're going to solve all the problems at once, and it's going to be the people in this room who are going to do it, right? The pipeline issue that you addressed is a very serious issue, but it demands a different kind of response. It's not something that we're going to solve by getting our individual companies to make donations to something. It's not going to work that way. The only way to address the pipeline problem, which is a systemic problem, is through broad-ranging social action, right? We need to get coalitions of people together, coalitions of companies together to address that problem in a broad strokes fashion. Similarly, there are going to be things in particular professions. I'm a lawyer, so we have our bar associations, we have our minority bar associations that can attack issues in our profession. And so we need to make sure that we bite off these various issues that can have enormous dimensions, bite them off in the right context, and don't get ourselves involved in trying to boil the ocean.
Thank you. Alfred.
Alfred Ramirez with alumni of Columbia University. And just Monday, I joined the U.S. Hispanic Leadership Institute out of Chicago. So my question is a professional development and re-engineering question. With industries converging, there's a blurring of the lines between medicine, finance, transportation, etc. What have you had to do personally to re-engineer, retool, to stay on top of your game expert, and to lead your organizations? And the advice you would offer?
Anybody? Yeah, Hernan.
Sure, I'll start. You know, there was a time when you could go to college, right, and get your 4 years of education and write it into the horizon, right, and that is gone, right. That is gone, right. And there's, you know, when you want to continue growing, right, you have to understand that you have to get better every day, right. And so, you know, in my personal career, I sort of said, look, I want to go there, and I had a very clear point of arrival, and I said, and in order to get there, right, what is that navigation path going to look like, right? And that navigation path had sponsors, right? In my words, it was my crew that helped me get there. But it also had all of those skills, soft and hard, where I had to get better, right? And so in today's world, right, if you make the assumption that whatever knowledge you got one day in a classroom has set you for life, right? That's table stakes, right? And by the way, everyone in middle management has it, right? And so this is where you push yourself to be better than everyone else, better than everyone else. Understand those convergence of industries, better than everyone else, because at that point in time, when the decision comes to the opportunity, it goes to you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
I mean, personally for me, something that I'm a recovering attorney, so I came from a law firm, and now I'm, you know, in talent development. So for me, what has worked is to, you know, kind of go to the fire, as I call it, you know, and not every job when I first took it seemed all that attractive, actually. But listening to the mentors, and then, you know, for me, it has been trying different things to acquire kind of all those toolkits, but, you know, it depends on the industry and the firm that you're in. You know, my firm, that's a perfectly acceptable way to develop yourself. But I think that you said it, Elizabeth, everyone needs to kind of figure out what is the culture, if it's through development, if you need to go back to school. You know, sometimes that's something that needs to happen. But oftentimes, you just need to kind of look around and raise your hand and say, I'll try that.
Go ahead.
I would just add, I also think that for me, it's been really important to not just find that intellectual stimulation and learning experience within the company. I do a lot outside the company. I work with young people through some of the nonprofit boards I'm on. I do work with my college. I mean, a lot of my continual learning or my big aha moments, or even some of my development when it comes to sort of new forms of media, that's the industry I'm in, has totally come from outside of the walls of my institution. So I think if I were advising a young person, I would say to look for learning experiences outside your company as well.
I speak to a lot of young folks and to a lot of executives in my role. But I'd say that the one attribute that Latinos have is adaptability. If you grow up in a bicultural environment, or multicultural environment, you have to think differently constantly. People ask me, do you dream in Spanish? I don't even think about it. Of course I do, but there's not a switch up here that turns on and off. And I think that attribute is extremely important in the way that we manage today's environment, because there's nothing for certain. So I really do think that's important. Manny?
Yeah, Victor Manning, Sanchez from Chicago. I wanted to follow up on a point that Ricardo was touching on, and which I hope, because in the last 3 to 4 decades, I've seen many one-time events and organizations that came up and with ambitious missions and with objectives and mission statements that were very laudable, but frankly, 5-10 years later, they went nowhere. I am very, very hopeful that in pursuing retention and advancement of professionals, particularly when we're talking about the corporate boardroom, et cetera, it's essential that we pursue something that I happen to promote as an entrepreneur for the last 28 years, networking, networking, networking. And I'll tell you, this is an unbelievable, unique collection of professionals and leaders and corporate stars in our community. many of whom, I've been around a long time, and I'm flattered to be part of this group, seeing what an august body that's here in New York today. And I'm hoping that all of us will take this to the next step, not let it die here, whatever that is. I applaud all these sponsors, MetLife, Goldman Sachs, Kaiser, Facebook, Hispanic Executive. Let's not leave it in New York in 2015. Let's make sure we follow up with something big and dynamic. All right?
Thank you, Manny.
Thanks, Manny.
Hold on, we got somebody back there. 1 second, bro. Okay. Sorry. I know. 1 second. Is there somebody that's keeping track of the time? Because I just want to make sure. Are we okay? All righty. Yes, sir.
It's 4:07, so yeah, we are on time.
Your name?
Yeah, Roberto Garcia from Puerto Rico. I came here to visit, and it's a hard act to follow after your comments. So I just have a question, actually. The focus of the panel is on keys to success for Latinos in corporate America. And small business and startups and entrepreneurship are critical for the economy to grow. And so I guess my question to you is, how can we also, as Latinos, promote a more of an entrepreneurial spirit, if you may, in the Latino community? And how can we get entrepreneurship to be the engine of economic development for the Latinos in the U.S.?
I'd like to answer that if the panelists don't mind. I'm working on a project right now at Stanford University. It's called the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative. The research with Jerry Porras, who's a professor emeritus there. We've identified that we obviously over-index on the formation of businesses by 3 or 4 to 1 than any other group. Problem is that less than 2% of those businesses scale to revenues over $1 million. So there's some gaps. We're doing some research right now, two types of research right now on identifying those businesses, number one. Number two, identifying the attributes that make them successful, overlay the general market on top of that and see where the gaps are. It could be capital, it could be the deal flow, it could be mentorship, it could be the network. We're doing that research right now, but the future of this country is Latino entrepreneurs. That's a creation of wealth that we need desperately in this community, to invest in our communities. It's also the creation of jobs. So I applaud you for raising that question, and I think that's really important, and we have to make sure in our businesses that we are supporting those businesses that are being formed. Yes, ma'am.
Hello?
I'm sorry, yeah, he has the mic.
Hello?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. You open a path for my generation, and really appreciate what you share. Hearing what you're saying, the problem with young Latinos right now is that the HR department, when they see resumes of Latinos and other people from the US, the names, it's sad, but it's true that they see the same qualifications, but with the name, since it's foreigner for them, they usually don't let them go to the next interview or the next phase. So my question for you is, have you worked with HR departments to create a more multicultural environment, since your mission is trying to create a company that is ready for the future, and Latinos will be part of it?
Yeah.
Elizabeth.
So I'm very lucky because we have all the talent acquisition team here from MetLife, but part is where we work with the talent acquisition. The other thing is how we work with the managers, because the recruiters are just replicating some of the biases that the managers have. They are just not doing that by themselves, and they may, but it's also, so it's how do we tool our recruiters, our staffing groups, to understand those resumes. They may not recognize the schools. I was not educated here, so someone may not know that the university that I went to is as prestigious in my country as others. So we try to work with our staffing and then also with our leaders. So a lot of the work that we're doing is around unconscious bias, but we also have processes that make all slates to be diverse. So we have policies to do that too.
That's where I was going to go is we took the bold step at my company last year of requiring, setting an expectation of a diverse slate for all executive positions. And the hiring manager cannot proceed until final round of interviews until they have reviewed that slate with the chief HR officer, chief diversity officer, and I'm also part of that process. And there's been many jobs that have been blocked because they didn't have enough of a diversity slate. It's a bold move that companies have to take.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm getting the cut it off sign in a few minutes. There's two more questions, ma'am, and then you.
My name is Angelica Perez Litwin, and I am a Columbia College graduate, alumna. So my question to the panel is the following. I have a career in business accelerator for Latinas and multi-platform accelerator because we need to reach Latinas in many different ways. But I've noticed over the span of my career working with Latinas over the past 20 years that many of them, highly educated, actually with MBAs from Stanford, wonderful degrees, come into corporate America, and they leave. They leave because, and that's actually the question, they leave because they're not happy, they leave because it's not the right place, they don't feel like it's the right fit. So my question to the panel is, why do you think that's happening? And they leave to go into entrepreneurship. So why is that happening? And what are you guys, women and men, doing? And especially the men, are you guys taking under your wing some of the women, Latinas, that are in your corporations?
Who wants to?
Well, I have a quick response to that because I would tell you that for companies in general, for many years, women left after reaching a certain level. Oftentimes that convergence of when you were going to have families and when your career was about to take off kind of came to a bad confluence in corporate America. What I've seen happen in the sort of years that I've been at companies now is that the most successful companies are ones that have really done a great job of promoting women, of being flexible about work schedules, about, particularly nowadays, the ability to work from home. And frankly, what I've seen in the past 5 to 10 years is that men also want to spend more time with their families, more time raising their children, so that what was seen as sort of a gender-specific issue now is really more of a quality of life issue. So I would just say that we have a unique opportunity, I think, to ensure that happens. My experience has also been that Latinas, like African American women, actually do really well in corporate America. That they're, oftentimes promoted at a higher rate, that the ability for them to sort of come into corporate America and to either find sponsors with women that have moved ahead or with Latino groups sort of allows sort of greater bandwidth. But I'd be curious.
One of the things that we've done was we've been very data focused in the last, I would say, 3 years. And when you do that, you are able to identify by population what your biggest vulnerability has been. And that has been a game changer for us because you see the stress points in people's careers. But the other thing along with that is that, we've talked a lot about what we can do and all of that, but at the end of the day, the people that make decisions about your careers are your managers. So we're very focused on managers, and part of my role is actually to train the managers to make sure that we keep them accountable, and data is a great way to do that because you don't have to bring your own opinion necessarily about whether they're doing a great job or not. Their numbers say if they're retaining their people and whether they're promoting them or not. And so I would say that sometimes for the women, I agree, actually we see a lot of success with our female Hispanic population also. But I think that you need to go at the root of who's holding the talent, and that's the managers, particularly at the senior levels. You're not gonna fix it by just mentoring the women or doing all the other things that are also important. But that has been like what we have tried.
Thank you. One final question. Last one, Alberto. And make it short.
It's not so much a question. As a fellow ambassador for the Alumni Society, I second the motion by Manny Sanchez from Chicago. Chicago's a place that makes and moves things. So, interesting fact, speaking with Pedro, I learned from Pedro that the attendees for today, 60% came from the New York and surrounding region, 60%. So 40%, if you think about it, flew in. So I know that New York City is going to be the focus next year, but maybe the third year we can bring it back to Chicago. And let's keep it going. Let's keep hanging those shingles. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you. One final round of applause for our panelists, and then we... Thank you.